사시에 보기 조심해도 까리라리시 니데게 바디 상계신도 믹대오와 기로구난다 신라주파쇼이담
Gururana
구루라나만달라
Mandala Kandiya
간디야타야
Sangi
저단
Chodam Sojin Chonam La Changshu Bardu Dami Kyavsun Dagi Chushi Gibon Zadaki Dola Penche Sangi Drupara Sho Sangi Chodam Sojin Chonam La Changshu Bardu Dami Kyavsun Dagi Chushi Gibon Zadaki Dola Sangi Drupara Sho Sanji Chodam Sojin Chonam La Chanchu Bardu Dami Kyavsun Dagi Chushi Gibon Zadaki Dola Sanji Drupara Sho Kangi Tuzini Zonle Tawa Tamche Pambi Cher Tambi Chun Denze Kodam Chela Chance Lo Good morning everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Kazangi Kolara. Right? Engines in the door. Could certificate chess on college time, but pay our sign here, lodging up for the giant lodging up.
The Lotte. Geshe had a bit of a break in the last couple of weeks, and he used it's time to go down to Maroochydore and do some English learning. He enrolled I think in a TAFE course or some community course of some sort. And he managed to do it for 3 weeks, and at the end of it, he got a certificate, and he showed the certificate to Mr. Rob. And the certificate said that Geshe scored very well in his kind of studies, but then it also made a note that it was like the level was like for between 0 to 5-year-old kids, isn't it? So he's doing well.
먼저 땡종 시온디 뜻사 뜻종 찬이 아니 땡종 시거레스 라땡 지단 최탐지 뜻사 뜻종이 약도 아니 최총 안지 ring 통세 상황로 뜻이 샤고야지 그러 아니 진짜 날 비게 인지kel 때는가 부친주 샤나 지고서래서
Or maybe it was kind of till maybe English equivalent to year 5, some sort. Anyway, Geshe said that in the Buddhist tradition, we often speak of dependent origination, in that whatever exists, all phenomena are related to each other. They're interrelated. So good and bad are relative to each other, big and small and short and long. Whatever exists in dependence on and in relation to others. So Geshe's English just as well. It's good English, but relative to a grade 5 student.
Delta 강아지 들이 안사님을 찾잖아요. 전 사바 인바나 안사님을 찾잖아요. 대로거레스 로존님이었어. 대도 로데고레스. 대디나무 조디 카레슬라운디 로종 그런 생거는요. 로종 슬라인자. 아니 디코스 다시 거라스로.
Anyway, during the Sunday morning teachings, we've been reading through a text that is called Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun. And this text is teaching methods for training our mind. This is what we've been covering.
대다디 저단 개침부 쇼치 야시야단 바레스 다로 그빌이야 gyunga yongin jimba나 디 개침부 빼 차고다 규메디 개침부 이메 하고 말았으라 엔자 디톨에 데스 직소즈고 아니 gyun은 제토바나 야시야단 바 수수 메세나노라야 아니 펜도 용거레스 대디 야시야단 바 랍투 그레스라.
And so this text from the tradition of training our mind, mental transformation, mind training, is considered to be very important. If you're familiar with the tradition of mind training, then you can appreciate probably the importance of mental transformation, training our mind. It might be that many of you are not familiar with this tradition, but for us, it's a crucial topic, mental transformation. And particularly if we take it on into our practice and bring it on into our daily life and make use of it to acquaint our mind with mental transformation throughout our life, we will reap a great benefit from that.
대다 간드스 레스 라운디 펜도 용당도디 아니 근데 간드스 펜도 용당도디 먼저 두시야 로야 레온디기 비기 까둑세남도 아니 내다 망부 질라야 게 망부 질라야 체용 그러와서 하든지 로야 레온디기 지 소소 비기다 지 개장 소로지 사야기 뒤즈도 빼 마무 책도 왔어라. 로총이 가위나 저부총 마무 좀돼야 수수 보고 버주기는 수수냠도 여대와 빼는 미게지면 딘디 차고 왔어라. 다이 로야 레온디 아니 보고도 살롱총 수수 보고 차 지원디 수수 산조온디 아니 파마도서 만체다 수수 개장을 소렇지. 아니 개유 차온디 아니 레가데메 다 개장기 소지고에 뒤즈망부치리기도 하서라 긴지 갑둘이야 로종 그 상무도 여봐야나 야채자담바 소소 박페부친 대투야기 자견디 땡땡 좀 그랬어.
And you might wonder, how is it of benefit if we acquaint our mind with mental transformation, with mind training? How will it be of benefit to us? Well, particularly in our situation, it seems that as we grow older in our society, in our situation, in our community, as we go older, it seems that many of us experience some difficulties or problems. And there are many points contributing to the challenges or the difficulties that we grapple with. Some of it has to do with loneliness. We become lonely or isolated from others. There's so much problems or suffering, anguish that is experienced because we grow to be lonely or to be isolated from others. So when we're young, we're surrounded by friends. We have family members around us. If you start a family and you have kids, then you spend a lot of time taking care of your family and kids and so forth. But they grow up and then they leave home, and many then find themselves to be quite lonely when that happens. The house is empty. Also, there's not a lot of friends being left around. So if it happens to you and kind of you feel that you're lonely and isolated, then this is a really good time to practice mental transformation, mind training, which is offering a set of techniques which can bring about a mind that is vast and spacious and more at ease.
어디래 지금 드니 아니 초진이 가리운 거래서 나온디 나도 담보 끼온디 아니 소소 개장치니 끼기가 봐 타면 치료 걸이야 아니 소소 개장치는 저기요 반사 개장기 아니 소개당기 로기에디야 아니 로종 디나말이야 라기도 왔으라 양아서 깨온디 지속 지금 나와 깨 그러 미망부지 끼려야 아니 몇지 깨고야 아니 지그래도 대야 비게 미션의 냠도 로당 두당 상로 당당 고양부 제당디야 아니 대비데 나와야 라그레스 간지 토니 아니 상로 당당디 창 상원치 로 로종델야 건 타버디 중앙 넘버 제바이나 라그레스 더 디게 무슨 나와야 펜톡 타치 야자 야탄 버려 어딘지 레드 로스로
Another point, at least looking at that from the perspective of the Buddhist tradition, it is said that when we die, when we are born, we are born alone. So the type of experiences that we have are only known to us. So, there is a sense of loneliness in that. And also when we pass away, there is also the sense of having to do it just by ourselves. So, we are born alone and we die alone. So working with a system of mind training, such as the one that is presented in this text, is giving us techniques to grapple with situations like that and other situations as well. And also we take into consideration that we grow up in human society. So we interact with others, we live amongst others. And obviously there are some challenging times that we experience also sometimes amongst others. So this text of mind training is providing techniques for dealing with difficult situations, and definitely 100% definite that it can bring some benefit into those situations.
랑안주미 망부지기 페나 따직 소소기 고 코르서 소르지 레도아즈 페나 아니 쇼킹하고 비기 니마샤원사 텔이야 니마샤사 텔이야도 아니 니마샤 용야 통디 쇼직 비기 텔이야 가오치 and 디츠된 디타가 줘야 소바 so this sem나라야지 and 대화지 용야 제대로 왔어라 and 더 베나 로종 델이야 공기 여버지나 가드이나야 아니 직 샘라야 아 니마샤비 소르치 대화지야지 somno 당서 야차 야탐바라고레스 로
And so in some situations, for example, when we have the weather might be good, we have some more time at hand, we could kind of be sitting outside in the sun and have some kind of relaxed time, and we can attend the mind kind of to think of some of those techniques that are provided in the system of mind training with a mind that is quiescent, mind that is kind of more vast and spacious, and definitely we can wake up with new ways of thinking that could be of benefit.
어딘지자 아니 먼저 디톨이야다 자니마 차진 로치 직 슈데고레스 당권 타버도 슈도모데 간지 아니 대대 되어 여버치니 슈데고레스 데링안조기 슈야기 참로디야 카레스 라운디 이 라미 추기 튠다워 차오세드레 피시데르
Rzeczok.
라
Ekologia?
이 라미 추기 튠다워 차오 유치 먹음 셰바니 랑레션라 펜총스 집이 아니랑 참바다 참 너들 치대가
Zadela ganzo niembet nutra ganzo kolok mija sesto. Kolok mija.
콜롬 마담
Ma kolok mija.
콜로 시카레
Kolok mija. Di. So digo tsudo. Kolok mija.
콜롬 마차 안딘로 참아레
Ganzo pesce di kimela lesson. Dice la rzeczok mija sesto. Lojun sejin. Tade dice la rzeczok mija se di la drona dire.
로스 제마칸 이 직단tin 마레샤
tanto que don't cover.
렌족 미차. 나다 님을 어제 저기야. 아니라기도.
So today we're going to pick up from the following section. I'm going to put the text on the screen. So we're looking at a set of instructions on mind training, which are found in different texts in the form of verses or maxims. Today we're going to pick up from instruction which says don't be sporadic. Do you know what page it is? Is it in the text? 104. So for those of you who have the text, then it's in page 104.
That's it. 갑자기 착부로지 되는 렌족 미차 세번이스. 렌족 미차 갑갑릴래야 아니 상로당 아니 갑갑래 베디 유샤야 소바. 딘지 세바이나 아니 로종티기 펜토 마리스 로 균댕기 상로치 땅토바이나 아니 샘래야 공지태야지 다 연구여러서 가리인바이나야 샘래야 공지태바이나 아니 샘기 더 간지 로종 제야디 샘 규화 땅야지 체된자 샘 규화 땅야디 아니 잘라 난신기 비지오야의 맨자고 아니 공지때니 규화태고엔자 아니 공지디 gyurumbuleya komyadi gyurumbuleya samtango grasra disungor da ingyu renjo mechasedi.
Now this text on mind training is using a language that sometimes is quite terse. It's an ancient language, so not always it is easy to pick up all the points that this text is explaining. But when it explains in general, these instructions don't be sporadic. What it means is that at times, our attitude towards a spiritual practice is that we become a little bit fickle. We do it at times, at other times, we just set it aside. So if we are haphazard or sporadic in our spiritual practice, there would be very little benefit or no benefit at all in terms of our mental transformation. So to transform our mind, we need to be consistent in acquiring new habits. So if we are seeking to change a mind, to transform a mind, it's not like fixing a machine in which you kind of pull out one part and put in something else. It's not like changing a machinery. It is something that requires consistent work. That takes a long time, right? So we need to give ourselves the time to work overtime and to be consistent in transforming our mind.
아니 대차 공조 응알기를 써봐 삼로지 망부여러서라 그두 슉 쳔불레온디 샘나 슉 쳔불레온디 샘 랑싱게 아니 박마페바지 마기바지 간지 대우메바지 야지야다 망아서 차기여거든 아주 용요 쪽으로서 딘자 벤다다 다 공조 소리지 또래야 공조래야 견다야디 some sick neviton control 견대바나 control로데 랑싱마 아니 시야치 용거was hirda di 아니 control로래 견다야디 깝깔이야 control로래 견다야 도나지 깝깔이야 삼을지마다 갈 control 사바는 디랑 진 로샤바나 아니 control 도투야 요마라스라 데 견데기 아니 control 세바나다 아니 가리나다 gyöngu yobata ani dinji tole gyöndengi chi samloji tangto wana ani gyaje gyatama konro di tsawni ni meba chetu yak ani tabshi chi rago wasares ra.
So then, for example, when we look at our mind stream, we have different disturbing emotions that arise in our mind stream: anger and attachment and jealousy and pride, and so many different types of disturbing emotions that sometimes forcefully and strongly arise in our mind. And it's not, when they arise very strongly, it's not very easy to remain with that state of mind. It's not comfortable. The mind is made unhappy, unwell. We know that based upon a person experience that when anger or jealousy or pride and so forth arise, they make a mind unhappy. We have that experience. Like, for example, with anger. So then if we can see anger as a faulty state of mind, in that it creates problems for us, it will naturally subside. But then to be able to see anger as a faulty state of mind, we need to be consistent in that if sometimes when anger is present, we see that as a fault, but at other times we let it be and we don't see any problem or any fault with that anger, it is likely that we're not going to be able to overcome anger. To be able to overcome anger, we need to all the time see it as a faulty state of mind. And if we can, whenever anger arises, if we see that as a faulty state of mind, definitely 100% would be able to gear up the forces to vanquish anger.
Renjo meja sheba no lojong la chik tu yig ma cheba renga pare gom zu tsen di sogdru che par to lunga ki gewa ming tawa pare cheba te tawa mayimba go sum ji zomba tamji zi chik dun di nye la jiv rigde tu sum sanje tamji ji dropa chik we lam yim cheras.
And so reading through what the text is saying with respect to these instructions, don't be sporadic, which is, by the way, is taken from a text that is called 7-Point Mind Training, which is the root text that Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun comments on. So it says this refers to meditating occasionally and performing some virtues of body and speech in the name of religion, but without all-hearted faith in the practice of mind training, being chiefly involved in amassing wealth for this life. Instead of behaving like this, it is appropriate to concentrate all activities of body, speech, and mind single-pointedly on this practice of mind training. This is because this is the soul path traversed by all the Buddhas of the 3 times.
Sanji Slaund da Pigita Ichesagita, Capchusagi. Any Lamdun Nanging Gita, Give Chod Georgia, the Munzin Chigors, the demand yang, and Taji Sanji Jomdendi and Contamas Laundi and Shidigi, any Shidi Papevki, Miji Badi, Sanji Chuki Milling in Jimbaya, Pesci Zigdosra, and do stay on the Mambu Jiki, Sanji Kuchi, go Susan Yankola, shouting in Pe Mambu. Iman Hakumi, the do down the Pe Mambu Shagdo, Sanji Chuke Manana, Sanji Kundachi, Susan Yankola shouting in Pe Mambu, the Gunsen Karis do sound down the Shidijlia, Zigdota, Kanji give the any Shidij in by Zigoras. Tindig give Shidich and the Chaya di and Lojong di Kona Cheval Demi, any Shidich and give Chaware Modo, Shamba Gujin Chia Yomarosro, Tinza, and Anzu Delia, Zungoyagi, Gunzi Diris.
So for us here in the center, normally we regard ourselves obviously as Buddhists. So if you are a Buddhist practitioner, if you follow the Buddha's teachings, that you trust the Buddha, you rely upon the Buddha, we regard the Buddha to be a teacher. For us, you can say that for showing the spiritual path, the path that we want to traverse, the Buddha for us becomes the best teacher. But even if you're not Buddhist, in general, in our society, when we think of the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, Geshe reckons that in general, when we look at the consideration of the Buddha in our society, Geshe reckons that in general, people would associate the Buddha with a state of peace or well-being, happiness and well-being. Particularly at this point in time, it seems that when you visit different places, sometimes you see people arranging or putting Buddha statues in the gardens or in other spaces, even if they're not Buddhist. And Geshe, when he started to recognize that people choose to have a Buddha statue, even if they're not Buddhist, Geshe reckons that it is because it is associated in some sense with a sense of peace and well-being, with happiness. So that this association, this symbolism of Buddha statue is what people in some sense are inclined to identify with. So when we think of that in terms of mind training, if this is what we seek to do, if we seek to develop a state of mind which is happy, which is well, which is vast, which is spacious, it can only come about through training a mind to be like that. It cannot be engendered in any other way. It's not that you can bring mental happiness and well-being into your mind without training it to be like that.
Torchud Jangshebanis, Hargidi Gunsente, Samsun Meva, Duma Tamji Tenila TV Tenris.
And so the next instruction in the text says, practice unflinchingly. This supports the previous point, without wavering. Integrate all aspirations to one purpose.
Tadiri Nanzuta Dinditoji Benada, Lomba Dinditoji Bana, and then Duma Tamji Tenila Ditungi Yoriveslana Mimangchagi, and it chiksin digi, Ro Togutamsum, Chedu, Lojonchi, Teachedu Tuzutan, Teachedu Legachin, Guding, Midacha Goju Kogu House, Teens that did they, you must see what Rogeria some source cigarasera. Tindi Samares, Tindi Dumatamji Delia Tanchini, and it's Mitsi Kansa, and Lojon Dichedu, and it Lojon Chedingi. Lomba Shenda Shenlaya, Be Mambu Yungores, Mambu Yungores, Ra, Nyonsan Shevana, Mambu Yarda. Dinti Chevana, and Sosu Mitsi Kanza, and Kibu Yongata, and Sosu Mitsi Digi, and the Mishanlaya, Pentotuya, but Dinti Yungores, Kanji Yungores, Ra.
This instruction in this section says, without wavering, integrate all aspirations into one purpose. So we might be wondering whether this is relevant to our situation. Here, for example, in this place, is it possible to integrate all of our aspirations and expectation into one purpose? After all, when we look in general at the way that our society works and what people do in our society, it seems that most people, more than 90% of the people, are invested in securing or seeking education in order to be able to provide for themselves, in order to be able to provide for themselves things which are associated by and large with this lifetime only. So food and clothing and social interaction and reputation and so forth. So since we have all of those different purposes, which are focused solely on this life, then it might seem to be impossible then to integrate all of our different aspirations into one purpose. But still, Geshe reckons that even though it is like that in general in our society, it's not that it is impossible to do that, because we can see that some individuals actually are able to do it even at this point in time.
Pena nga tunyons tini mi mangulaya, mi mawa dindi mambu yosajilaya, den salon chongyoro asira, ani nyinsen dini, ani duma tamji, pigi lojong laya tani, and dating the tongja mambu, kilaya, lo mambu deros, pena ngarang genru muchiro jimbana. Ngoni samsum meban duma tamji tenyele divi kiuchi, ani pe genru muchiro esilabana. 딱딱 차고라서 배나 로 게르무지 공롱가니 아니 잡았어 아니 이길라 되니 제니다 아니 판만이 카트치 그게 개겐살았지 달로죠 탈 공로 구축코 니 파르도 아니 로존 디코나라야 로존 디토니 밀레야 펜도치 로존 디토니 소수 냠는치
Particularly, Geshe looks at his personal situation. So growing up in Tibetan society, which is, you could say, more cohesive society. So people don't live in, no, there are not many people live in isolation. Actually, people live pretty much together. Particularly in Geshe's training in his monastery, growing up amongst hundreds and thousands of monks, and then people live together like that. And you can still see many hundreds or thousands of people that might be busy in different things. You can say that they have different aspirations, but still all of them are brought together into one purpose. First and foremost, Geshe says, like, for example, his teachers. Gen Rinpoche's teacher that passed away when he was 90, around, let's say 92 or 93 years old. So he became a monk when he was 5 years old. Then at some point, he moved out from his parents' house, from the care of his parents into the care of his teacher, and have grown up in a monastic community. Then, as Geshe said, he passed away when he was, let's say, 92 or 93 years old. And all during those years, from the age of 5, when he was when he started to learn how to read and write, all along he was studying methods for mental transformation. Also, in his life in the monastery, was teaching them to others, and also he practiced it himself. So in that sense, you can, Geshe sees that as the first and foremost example of someone that could take all of those different aspirations and purposes and integrate them into one purpose that goes for one's entire life.
ngommi bebegi dradalaya ani gedu ba nyanda taya shuyo rasro gegensan nyanda nima ge pi jango ya ti jan ani so ngajukje go rasro pi shogmambo shog ni sum sheti ngajukje ta tagda mandro wa na lamsang nyanda raga tinji yenaya tu ne kali gyap chinro nyanda se kali gyap tu chin ta deni tüngyür chongchen ani 배 야미기 전송 집에 가둘래야 아니 정간나래야 로고스 슈레스 바긴 정간나 로고스 슈 이내 정간나 슈비 가둘래야 비 장왕고래야 내가 치서 로고래냐 샘나래야 로종토래야 삼로다 gonda 니온디나야 니베카데 니마코니 엔피 로종토래야 아니 삼단의 슈이 딱디겐 코랑갈 무스페 아니 살 mambu송인자 니 비셈나라야 비 시우슈진 자르데샤스로 두지 되니 정간은 탈니 야갈이야 추돌이요 아니 야갈이요 갑들이야 초교슈 대단 교슈 저되냐 차비티 미셈발이야 차비티 아니 냠도 소주기 비 곰냠는지 쇼기 추즈 숭발 비시 차치 소르지 여러분이 상고레스 온 gonda 추 마스미야 아니 되니 타사기 비기다 아니 캠보고 차례라 소바 게게기 차례 더 유르부 쇼지 나요레스 더 되니 자세 캠보 큐사비 제라 공로 든추 페시 땅이 딱딱질라야면도 내가 교자로다 든추 텐숨 텐시질이야 아니 갱기 시니 비기다 삼내 쇼지 년천내 쇼 이담 도지지지 년천 로숨다 다와숨 아니 캬바레스 공로 든주 텐수 텐시 카들이야 더 든주 탱갈이야 참 슈데거데 겐용서 댕이스 슈 탱고 참 되니 더 년천의 슈 카들다 문도니 진다 디나로야 로숨 다 다와숨나 살고한자 근데 참 범사야라 소보 멘전 범사야라 연천 범피야라 소보 이견 범사 참로 공로 든주 텐단 깔이야 시니 남바레스 니깔이야 단다이나 비기 센추도 쇼잉하고 추숨발에 생거랬어 타를 공로 비기다 개치 겹기 겹고다 구주 내단 그 짜니 맞춰 깔았다 제마도 디버도 게 쇼기 추숨발에 상친 로종 톨에 투섬시 거랬어 배 시제데 템바 무스 때바이나야 아니 다만 잼바 이 초바 시제 템바지 근데 용야디 로종디 치고 코널 때는 총자에 뭐 세우 세잖아요. 그럼 아니 벤조 톨이야 투성시요 말 벤조 주요 말에 미라야 치도 내가 치요 말 가야 치요 말데 미강가 그럼 살조 텔레비 미강가 배 이용 쳐봐지 용야디 로종디 쳐볼 때는 총여버디 땅이 무슨 통고라서
So Geshe mentioned his teacher who became a monk when he was very young. So he became a monk at a young age, and he spent many years studying. And in the older days in Tibetan society, when you were studying in a monastery as a young monk, then you had a certain quota of memorization that you had to do every day, right? So you have to memorize the page, and then you memorize it in the morning or evening, then you go to see your teacher and you need to recite it for memory. And if you don't do it well, then you might be smacked with a small stick. It was, those physical punishments were not uncommon before. Anyway, Geshe said that his teacher grew up in this way. Then following the Chinese occupation in Tibet, and mostly during the Cultural Revolution, where many monks were incarcerated, Geshe's teacher ended up in a labor camp for 9 years. So conditions were pretty severe. They had to do difficult labor throughout the day, and also they were living in starvation conditions. So it was difficult to have a good sleep at night. So on those sleepless nights, he said, I just used to think of mind training, so all the things that they've studied before. This is what he engaged his mind with during those difficult years. So he became since there were so many of those sleepless nights, that were on account of being starved and also being exhausted. He said that those instructions of mind training really got stuck in his mind, to the point where they were fully integrated, you can say, in his mind. Then at some point he was released from prison, from labor camp, and he left Tibet as a refugee and made his way to India, settled in South India. And back in the days when Tibetans settled in India, the first few decades, Tibetan refugees were living in really harsh conditions in South India. So food was scarce or really poor, conditions were really poor. But Geshe's teacher, being a monk enrolled in the monastery, he was giving teachings. He was also doing his own personal practice, keeping a very very busy routine regime. So waking up every day at 3 a.m. at night, doing his meditation, then spending the day still doing some practices, also teaching to others, then going to bed late at night after having finished all his jobs, then progressing through different roles in the monastery. So being a teacher, then taking up the position of the abbot of the monastery. And he got to, let's say, retire, let's call it like that, when he was in his 70s. Finally, he managed to relinquish some of his responsibilities in the monastery, and he entered into a 3-year traditional retreat when he was in his 70s. I guess I can't remember the exact time, but let's say that when he was like 73 or 74. So this traditional retreat is a retreat that lasts for 3 years and 3 months, also kept in a very strict routine. So obviously still waking up every day at 3 a.m. and studying one's meditation practice. And this retreat also requires, the retreat was spent in cultivating a deity practice, a deity that is called Vajrabharava, which also necessitates doing a whole set of preliminary practices, accumulating a certain number of recitation, prostrations, and so forth. So you need to do, as a preliminary practice for the actual retreat, you need to do 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 mandala offering, 100,000 recitation of Vajrasattva, 100,000 offering of water bowls, and so forth. So it was in his mid-70s, and it was doing all those difficult things in his retreat. And he finished his retreat and still continued with his busy schedule. And it continued to do so up until the end of his 80s, when he was 88 or 89 years old, when it was more difficult to do it due to kind of his deteriorating physical condition. But till then, this routine of waking up every day at 3 a.m. and spending one's time in meditation was kept very strictly. And due to that, whoever met him kind of found Geshe's teacher to be very impressive, very kind of very inspiring. People have deep faith in that person. And that came about through mental transformation, through mind training. It's not that he was trained or a master in the ways of the world in terms of business and commerce or what have you, or politics. He became master of mental transformation, and this is what drew people to him. This is why people found him so impressive, so inspiring.
그래서 착부슈였다서 오늘 단데 단단히 싸움단데 배 항상야 요래서 다 공로든지 된주 깔려야다 인신의 차려다 타마들이야 진시 범칙 난거다 아니 센사치고다 깔거야 센생가사고다 근데 공로든지 된주래 난 깔려야다 센생가래 긴그러 진시 제 참아들이야 안 괜찮대슈다 아니 샤브지면 되게 센생가 센 마무기는 엔디스 스타다스 깔리자 칠로르 도와요다 로쳔불 지난 깔려라 저니 깔릴 쟁말스 대디간에 로숨도 다워숨 나로야 디참마 살고 거레스 이내 겨울무지 전 삼되는 디그레스 이내 배셔 튀고르 송라 지체용만 닝구 배셔 튀고다 나로다 치도 비 년전트사 정나우나 튜시 끼고르 인지미 끼고르다 튜시 빠르려야 뒤수 동버스는 기르려 배셔 튀고르스
저선 센생가서야지 센치야만 생각이 되는 거죠.
생각하시지
아니 님값을야는데 다가나
님가서요
Now thinking back of the lifetime of his teacher, Geshe says that, it's pretty hard life, you could say, or really busy, but still it's also incredible at the same time. So as Geshe said, he entered into this 3-year retreat when he was in his mid-70s, and he finished his retreat when he was 76. And when you finish a retreat like that, this type of retreat is called a great approximation, in which you meditate on a certain deity, you approximate the deity in your mind, and at the end, the retreat regime is that you have to have 4 sessions every day. The first session starts in the pre-dawn period. So at the end of the retreat, there is a practice that is called the fire puja, in which you need also to accumulate a certain amount of recitation and certain amount of practices. This is a practice that is done in order to rectify, to correct any mistakes, additions, omissions that you have had in your practice. So since he had also to do kind of this 100,000 repetitions also with this fire puja, it took a few days and a few nights, so there is like fire and smoke and dust, living in South India. And it was in his mid-70s, still kind of going through that and doing all of those practices in the mid-70s. And to add to that, since he wanted to go on that retreat after he finished up with his responsibilities in the monastery, was the abbot of Setaje Monastery. He entered that retreat, and his honest, the Dalai Lama said, well, look, you might be going into retreat, but you cannot really give up all of your other responsibilities. So you still need to continue teaching during the day. So basically you do 4 sessions of practice every day, and rather than having a break or rest in between during lunchtime, then that period of the day is spent teaching, still continuing to teach others. So thinking about doing that when you're in your mid-70s, it's pretty incredible.
데르다 공로 굽추 코지 깔려야다 게 샵다 kuzu ne dang tone shang tu yo mares shang tu go mar a simje na la shu de go ta simje na shu de go de ne nimma chi le ya chi tu ma tro yo so chi yo mares pigi le ya pigi odi nyingu ga la ya shan shu de ba ne ya ani tu le ya gom gyan shu da ta ya cha ya tang ba ani shen de na ya ro demba du nga to le yo ra tu chin ani ta nge nimma da ba de bi chapsan chapjin gen ko na pe tu ma ngi tsulen ro chi go de ne ya tu le ya shen de na ya da tu sin shu du kanji pe 간지 원의 찬이긴 디나라야 아니 참춘 매번 도마 탐지 되니라 디세디 도마 탐지 되니라 디세디 된디질에 고고고 서레스 된디난거레스
Then reaching the age of 1991, it was already old and frail. He got to the point where he had some knee problems, knee issues. He could no longer get up from bed. And as his body was becoming weaker and weaker, he remained in bed all day, kind of lying in his bed, but his mind was not distressed at all. He was not distressed or agitated. He was lying in bed, and in his mind, he was still doing his meditations. He was still doing his practices. He was still doing his recitations. After all, he was familiar with all those recitations by heart, so he continued with his practices. And Geshe was the one that attended to his physical needs every day. Geshe witnessed this last few years at the life of his teacher. And Geshe is mentioning all of that because when we think of integrating everything into one purpose without wavering, integrate all aspirations to one purpose, well, this is an example of how it is done.
비 미디 동발 때데데 아니 믹좀 데데요 바이나야 니쿠 여다 메디 하고도 서라 군주서 하고다디 캔자레도 아 비게 도 슈데 월다나 비게 니쿠 여 비까비 바다 니쿠 메바다 하고다 아 망치야 비 심슈요 말다 아니 이 삼자래 그지 게 심쿠데게스 같이가 따고 니쿠 데지를 통고데 세라 아 인지 검견 슈다다로 검견 인지미 쪼쪼시 되고 니다 연구가는 샤 진수 시샤지 아니 검견 교는 무슈지 어들 슈다 가서 디 지구 여바디 꾸줄이야 공감문도다 랑아도 로즈나 아니 니는 초지래야 니는데나 추적 가시지래야 수분 나이고다 견건도 추주 쭉쭉 쭉니 라고한다 추주다 domba jewan shogi chuzu domba jewa pe gogyo kar jawmda nagdure sikje lagmda diko mixage reda sro tandangi tangi tuzan samdang ditini shigni mang sorgdos rangi mangone geng chile yebi kadle ya chitang soze genle ya dot mebi teba yore gaw yore geng chedo ninsen kazukali jago chona ya gyab thugor de ya 단다 samda 나신기야 가고가 철마도 마무리게 두스라.
And also during the day, Geshe, as he was staying at Geshe's house and Geshe attended to his daily needs, he was lying in bed, and for a long duration he was lying with his eyes closed. But Geshe says that sometimes if the person is asleep or just with the eye closed. So during the day when Geshe was kind of in the room and Geshe was lying in his bed with the eyes shut, Geshe knew that he was not asleep, but sometimes just in order to kind of trigger a conversation, Geshe said, "So, are you sleeping?" And his teacher would kind of open his eyes and say, like, "Were you thinking that I'm actually sleeping?" Anyway, Geshe says it's kind of more of indicative that you can do your meditations in different situations. It's not that you have to be sitting in a very strict meditation posture. You can also do it when you lie in bed, when your body is completely at rest. You can still use your mind for meditation. There's no problem with that. And he used to, one thing that was quite interesting was that he used to stay in the same position for 11, 12 hours. Like for us, if we lie in bed without moving, after some time, it starts hurting, right? It becomes uncomfortable. We need to shift, to change position. Geshe's teacher was kind of staying in one position for 10, 11 hours and never said that it is painful or uncomfortable. So now thinking back of those years that Geshe got to nurse his teacher, now we can appreciate some of the experiences to be quite special. It's harder to appreciate them when you're in there doing the work, and kind of quite a few things that you need to do day in and day out during the days. So of course, you still have Geshe, so they still have this unshakable deep faith in his teacher, but then looking back now of the different things that transpired, came to pass, Geshe can now appreciate some of them to be of great significance and also really special.
There is that kanji dindiji tang tuya yongya di semnaloya tembushu chaya di big nelu janiro shibayna tangone ani duma tamje telya tang tuya chi yungyo tanganzu mashina ramajana shingamara mashina di chegorslana kalakawo shochi bekalakawo yorasra tanganzu matuya de majawi kyunchik Rajani bigi nenga di semlaya ratrabayna I'm zawani le madangji yungura sara bigi the jijin chabsu da chagdu ne pena ani gyami kongrangi ani phe samme tame khadulaya so phegi ani sanji temba ta samme tanya tabshi 유그자루친 짬에 땅바레스 공부 삼도르 저다 안에 삼아비기 세고에 세도고에 또 마무슈 셔데이냐 미 셈낭로라야 자원이는 촉투요 말레스 비기 치 남규디 코런서 왕천부레 아니 천재요레 자우르다이냐 셈낭기 아니 대바탐식디 자원이니 가르치나야 촉투야 문도서로 어디르다 셈레 신바이나 lötan matue di yungres da di machine ani sam lötan di chadogros ra
So that can be done and also formed. It can be formed in a mind to become really stable. To be able to do so, what we need to do is to train our mind in relation to reality, in relation to the way that things exist. If we train a mind in conformity with the way that things exist, we will be able to do it. We'll be able to become stable. And in this way, we can, as it says here, we can integrate all aspirations into one purpose. But for us at the moment, it seems to be extremely difficult. And of course, things like that seem to be so hard, so difficult, because we haven't acquainted the mind with that. We haven't trained ourselves to do so, and therefore it becomes it looks very difficult to the point where we think that this is impossible for us to do it. No, there's no way that I'll be able to do it. But if we do put our heart and mind into the training, we'd be able to do it. We won't give up on our mind trainings. So again, maybe kind of mentioning another point about kind of Tibet, and it's Chinese occupation of Tibet. When China took over Tibet, there were more than 6,000 monasteries in Tibet. The vast majority of them were completely destroyed, razed down, and also monks and nuns were forced to live their monastic lives. Many of them ended up in prisons, camps, and labor camps, and so forth. But still, you kind of, even though the physicality of the Buddhist scenario in Tibet was completely destroyed, taken away, the heart was not taken away. So people still have faith, kept on to the faith in the mind, in the heart, and into the pledges that they've made, and that came through training a mind in order to do so. So, you can say that your monastery can be destroyed, your lifestyle can be destroyed, but still, if you have trained your mind in a particular thing, you're not going to give it up. Now they can take away your heart, your monastery, but they cannot take away your beliefs if you have trained your mind in doing so. If you haven't developed your mind recognizing reality, recognizing what is real, then of course you can at some point give it up. You can relinquish whatever you've done before, but really through training, you will not give it up.
그래서 지 신바에는 되니다 탑시 유급자로 토니 비 단dum마 탐제 될 땅세디 또 지기도 하서라 가진 더버지는 이게 타겟톨이야 라마소버룸 지기 년턴돈 제서라 많은 콜로 친구지니 쪽세건 뜻이야 아니 차비치들라고 챌린지 주느라 차 대우요 말다 그래서 이나야 피기디 타바디 츠테 콜로니드고 디 차비스 빼데다 당간주 시에서 맞는다 호타 바다 생긴다 더 드니시기도 하서라 간주 지금 말하다
Another example of how if you really train your mind, you can hone all aspirations into one purpose is, Geshe, a couple of days ago, saw a YouTube clip with Gyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche is the spiritual director of this organization. And a few years ago, he suffered from a stroke, resulting in having physical disabilities or being paralyzed in half of his body, but he went through rehabilitation. And Geshe saw this video clip of him sitting in his room, and it was kind of, in one hand he was holding a text, kind of reading a text. It was reading. It seems like he was holding it in the hand that kind of was more suffering from the stroke. In the other hand, he was holding a rope that pushed or spin a prayer wheel. So you kind of still did those two things together. They were actually kind of, it was kind of doubling his action. There were two of them, two prayer wheels that was spinning. And Geshe said, I kind of still kind of with all those difficult physical condition, it was just kind of going for it, doing his best.
That tuksom trou shujerda tuksom pedlo devu shujerda ra nganzu kibu go warda pigi ani tebdi jani mixi pesha rasha yata kalaya rasha skiyo marda manin kolo korni min da kosa rasha kiyo marda ine da digi susu semba di kibu shuchago resta kanji dodo de nganzu goya di kibu derwada 먼저 배셔 써야 돼 기부 용액체들이 간바 지구 써야 돼 기부 용액체들 또 기부 되느라고 그랬더라.
Well, you can do something like that if you do it with a happy mind. If your mind is happy, you can do it. So thinking of kind of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and watching this clip, Geshe reckons that Lama Zopa Rinpoche is able to go through those different difficulties. For us, it would seem to be quite difficult. You can do it if your mind is happy. If you're really happy to do it, then you do it. Now, obviously, it's not doing it to gain money or reputation, to make a good name for himself. He's doing it because it makes his mind happy. Similarly, when we look at the difficulties that we go through our daily life, we might take up a certain job that might be difficult, but we do that in thinking that that will provide me with happiness, in a sense that I will gain a wage, I will have some money, I will be able to afford a house, it would be very enjoyable, it would be very comfortable. So we can take up certain difficulties if we think that that will make me happy, that will make my mind joyous.
When ganzu chezok mato gogi mari nyokdra kazu shegorda nyokdra message maushu tangora sara ganzu delia ani chi the mama me jata chi nisiki pi this message ro ta nyokdra sheo ganzu nyobdro dos tanche kashi sheoji pe de bosuto chaya dendi ani nyokdra saudos lajen lama sorum chile zambeling nalo ya ani 제리스 추조 나시게 녀터서 망보라 사마기 녀터 시에니 피글에 깔려서디네 디기 녀터 디기 rumji thule ya maki wada madewati yungum dasde yungo marda ro tele donen che tugore tele labjan nan tugore and dita nyam de suzugi and nimachi nyamne chansa nang tuya and tulu dewu yongya sama yungda di lojong de chebal ten yongre mod shimba and subi gi jubcha ding an sama chibu chigyan res ro chibu chigyan res.
So mentioning Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the spiritual director of this organization, who is already in his 70s, as we said, he's kind of suffered from a stroke. It was probably 10 years ago, would you say? 2011. We are now in, yeah, so 11 years ago, more or less. So Chenrezig Institute is part of an organization called the FPMT, which has many centers around the world. So there are always problems. There are always difficulties and problems, not only here, at a place like that, but everywhere, in all organizations, which are run like charity. There are NGOs, charities. So Geshe reckons that Lama Zopa Rinpoche daily receives messages from centers, like telling him about problems and complaining and issues and difficulties. It happens to us also, so we have here, in this organization, this center, so we've been around for almost 50 years and we have hundreds of people associated with this place. So of course, we live in society, so of course there are always problems and issues and complaints and so forth. And sometimes when you do it day in and day out, you become really weary. It kind of grinds you down and you become unhappy and really fatigued, really jaded. And Geshe Reckon starts thinking of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's not just Chenrezig Institute that is every so often sending complaints or problems or challenges and so forth. It's probably everywhere, coming from all directions. So we would probably end up be completely jaded and unhappy if we had to be in that position. But it seems that in the case of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, is not only be able to just deal with that, but also is still taking it head on, still continue to give teaching and advice to different people around the world, and still continues with his spiritual practice, with his meditation practice. Well, that can only come through training your mind to do so. On a physical level, we're all the same, So Lama Zopa Rinpoche was self. On a physical makeup is exactly the same, but in terms of being able to cope with difficulties and to do it day in and day out and still continue with your spiritual practice, you can do that if you train your mind to do so.
Dinaldoazda dokjungi tarwacha shebani tykundu karshibi pembarinton parmi goni zimbatang shiba gosum joba kono da chebala tani suyonwa dans yi rangwi tsuki tun dabar chawos edi dirta yi rangwi tsuki tun dabar chawos tingoni yungu yosare kiwitang basula yi rangwi tsuki tun dayachi ra nganzu ani yig marang tsuki maki bata mandrik bata deba makami tun dar goyachi chagadosara.
And so then the next instruction says, release investigation and analysis. This means that you should give up gross and subtle analysis of your motivation for your actions of body, speech, and mind with reference to your long, middling, and short-term aims, and should spend the time rejoicing, which means that you should continue with whatever you've been doing in making sure that your mind still remains in a joyous state of mind. So this is a pertinent instruction for us because, as we said often, we can find ourselves to be quite jaded, unhappy, and so forth, and then we lose momentum. So it's important to really continue to make sure that we continue training our mind, but also keeping our mind in a joyous framework.
Yu chi mugum shebanis rangri shenla pemba chungsi shi chibi yuki kondo ngadun denshin changwi nambar mechati chingi yu rigna chomdendi yi song rigbali muzong vicheros.
The next instruction says, don't be boastful. Do not boast of the little good you have done for others by repeatedly reminding them of it. If it were proper to boast of the good you have done, the transcended savior, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, would have said so, but he did not.
그래서 이제는 유셰디 유셰다 직벌하다는 이거 유셰나 소수 내가 제자 유들이야 무슨 총으로야 이 차가 와서라서 변나 사상진 바이나야 이 교가디 칼라야 부스에나 아니 소수기 사다디 가오임 거라서라 그냥 이 칼라야 부스에다 그러지 유셰바나 ngōsō chōng rōg rōs, rā, tīndō rā, kanji yu shīgi mēn sā rēs, tā, rā.
If you become boastful of whatever you do, you, in some sense, reduce the efficacy of what you've actually done. It's like we can even speak about it in a really simple way. Kind of, you have a relationship, you cook a meal for your partner, and if you start boasting of how well you've cooked it and how great you are as a cook, it seems that kind of the food will not be as good as if you just kind of keep your mouth shut. Da kasa di kala shioji soe machin den shioji ins la di lawai na den chik.
Kerang che de ser slamna la yas kerang marasra so sa go tin nyam de ser da. Din roji reshasra penada dinamaya ngonni gi pendo chini legal lab chin chin yu shegono chomdendi ro chomdendi tan zambuling la pheyagi 아니 랍샤치 나요라다 로니도 추기한 조사되니야 단다 수 삼로타마이나야 랍샤디 마팽사치 때요 말다 오늘 라트웨팅이지나 이나야 아니게 딘디기 랍샤야고 시켜줄래 제여다 견성의 가진 전권도 준나야 아니 송시가 말았어 어디 딘사다 딘디지 송고자래
And so, thinking of the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the Buddha gave teaching more than 2,600 years ago. And if you study those teachings, if you think about them, whoever thinks about those teachings, Geshe reckons that he would not find something that is unhelpful. But still, the Buddha did not boast about it, thinking that because they're so helpful, then you should consider me, you can appreciate my kindness.
The Kolong Madame Chevanis. The Kolong Madame Sanda and a long langio mare said the Reta, Niankurso, Tome Chu Shila, Kolong Damba Mechatis, Ra, to get Namjutin Lari, Chichawachetan, Chunju Tone, and a Lamsan Long Lani in the Chede Yomares. Mechatis, Tedar Minna, Shangi Goboso, Moron Soji, Tamzing Namdanka Vicheros.
And so the next instruction is don't be short-tempered. You should not express dissatisfaction with the size of offering and rewards, or you will breach the commitment not to grumble.
Tedda Jitangi long lang said, Ganzulea Rigni Soraji, the younger Dazara. Rig Chiglaya, Magani, now Mandroni, and a long line chick. Younger Dazara. The debate of Jarada, the D. Nyangatsao, and a round the Shenigalaya, and Nuts of Chamboi, Chagosares. And Rig Chick the Semta Yin, Semta New Chawandi, and long line chick. Younger Daza. The D. Nesam the Ozin Sarsam Dazara. Pena Nanzuta Gagans are like you there also. Gagans are you dedi. Gagans and Southern Pema Ragra. Gagan without but the Shavshin and Southern Pema Ragra. Did he Gagin Magan in long Langomar, the Jazzy.
It says here, don't be short-tempered, right? This is the instructions taken from the 7-point mind training. So thinking about being short-tempered, you can probably say that there are two types of two occasions in which people become short-tempered. One of them is when you experience something that you dislike. You're not happy with it. This type of short-temperedness is negative. It is actually quite dangerous. It causes you to harm someone else. So this is kind of, you can say, like a very negative way of being short-tempered. But there's another one in which you become short-tempered with people that actually you like, people that are close to you. Like, for example, Geshe mentioned being, having spent many years with his teacher. So now, obviously, there's kind of a lot of warm-hearted relationship, but sometimes when you're, in the presence of your teacher, you also get a lot of scolding. So you get kind of scolding, or kind of you're being criticized for one thing or another, but it's not done with a malicious state of mind, with vengeance, or with kind of this intention to harm. So, in some sense, you can say that there are those two types of short-temperedness. One of them is really negative. The other one is not necessarily so.
파마도서 파마도서 수수 푸둑라 그 푸둑디기 지 로존 야보 마체다 쳬바 야보 마체디 파마도 롱랑거라스 라 롱랑야디 그비 야보 싫어 치나 삼친 롱랑거라 마도 아니 코 독자 차로 천선 롱랑거 말았어 그 야보 차도도 삼 롱랑게요 말다 마가사지 임바이나 야보 차원디기 롱랑야다 차도 사야죠라 파마기 푸둑라 롱랑야디 디요 말았어 난신기 개긴기 게둘라야 타살야 롱페 땡거를 개긴도 빼 롱땡거라 이나야 샘니에던 지 야부 차로지는 삼니 에 콜롱 넘버 땡겨 야지야다 말했었어.
In some sense, it is similar to a family situation where, if you're a parent and you have kids, if they don't study well, or if they misbehave, you might become a little bit short-tempered, but it is because you want them to go well. You want them to grow up in a good way. So it's not that kind of you can become short-tempered with them because you dislike them. No, sometimes sometimes things go well for someone that we dislike, and that also makes us unhappy. We become short-tempered when someone that we dislike succeeds. Well, that's associated with jealousy. So in a monastic situation, sometimes your teacher might be short-tempered with you, or they might scold you, but it's not done with vengeance or with kind of this ill will state of mind. There's still this close-heartedness in which they really want you to do well.
요즘 메차 셰바니스 곰피갑기 쫀주 좀비 sultende 담보상이 좀시 제네 아니 보름 조비 몽데 뒤꾼도 초침비 견달 발 마치지 슈미 견달 찬타미 건 좀 그때 나왕아들레 캐버는 파버지 wal라 결라 탄드 가마 좀 디시케지 캐버는 토론 좀 예만치 시송바 따로스.
So after these instructions of not being short-tempered, it says, don't make a short-lived attempt. It serves no purpose if you affect some effort in meditation at the beginning and then leave it altogether. Effort needs to be like a great river or a strong bowstring. The praise of the praiseworthy says, for you to prove your superiority, show neither flexibility nor rigidity. Therefore, your supreme quality is to show no distinction of rank or partiality.
로자인다. 왜 제문도 제반네 펜중 중시 제베게 렌 대마다 레바다고 덴드위르라 상인 제마지면다. 왜 치세와점 양 칸의 모원도 제바다고 방월자고 장주 삼바 준비 제가왜 대들 투냠수집이 레벨 20 샤니 투랑 송천번이 랑기 메버마위 규 동아땡이 찰세니 당전도 당가슈 단이 시험 민교도 시송소 대다기 꾼들 장주기 섬종 시선도스.
So we're going to read through the last instructions, which concludes this section of training in the conventional mind of enlightenment. And the last section says, don't expect gratitude. This refers to not expecting an immediate reward for whatever little good you do. You should give up saying that there is no use being good or otherwise, to such and such person, because he can't even say thank you. The great Bodhisattva Chekawa put this into practice to good effect. With a sense of satisfaction, he said, my manifold aspirations have given rise to humiliating criticism and suffering. But having received instructions for taming the misconception of self, even if I die, I have no regrets. This concludes the explanation of the training in conventional awakening mind, conventional bodhicitta.
강아지 제만이 아니 따위 코트 라 넘버 산기기 따와 따위 코트 리그레스 machines.
So we have completed the section, which was quite a long section explaining the training in the conventional mind of enlightenment. What we will stop with next week is to look at the training in cultivating the ultimate mind of enlightenment, which then is teaching the Buddhist philosophical view, how things exist in reality according to the Buddhist tradition. This is what we will start with next week. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we will finish off this session with making some dedications for the virtue that we have created in studying this section together. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merit of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Sever of the snowland teachings and transmigrator beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Finally, Namaste Prabhuji. You uphold the Buddha's moral way, who serves in the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Several of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you, boss?
The little section about you should, abandon analysis, subtle analysis of motivation. That's worldly motivation, or is it? Motivation?
I think that could be that, or it could be sometimes. I think, sometimes when you decide to do, you decide to embark on a certain practice or thing, kind of you become over analytical about it. Like, should I do this? Should I do that? This kind of thing that where you walk down into kind of this kind of small questions, and some of the things are not really important and they really slow you down.
Yeah.
Maybe it refers also to that as well. We can ask Geshe about what he thinks.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, maybe I'm not right.
Sorry?
I should just rejoice.
You should?
I get the gist of it.
Yeah.
But, I don't really understand. But saying just focus on rejoicing. So to blow away that obstacle.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
But you still have to check your motivation and analyze your motivation. That's sort of practice.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think that kind of, sometimes when we discuss in general, kind of, some of the practices that we do, some people have this, sometimes a tendency to kind of be like analyzing, like splitting spiritual hairs, like, but what if I do this and that person say this and that, and then, just, sometimes I think, just do it.
Yes, you talk about it in the context of, FMT, so many different problems. Okay. Yeah.
You've been well, otherwise?
Yeah.
Loafing? Baking bread? What's loafing?
It's not very much.
I've been eating bread. Is that loafing?
So it's listen to some poetry, awkward.
Okay.
You know who he is?
I had a name, but I'm not kind of I'm not a scholar of poetry, I have to say.
He was talking about things back in 1885, his first plane came out. Still amazing. Still one of the most amazing parts of the universe and the thing about it. So
Okay.
he was a real dumb teacher, but nobody really realized.
What's his name? Paul Whitman. I think that the name is very familiar, but as I said, I'm quite a bogan in terms of poetry.
Well, you're taking it. So
Sorry?
you're taking the IT crowd. Oh, it's really humanities, right? He went running down to the theatre.
I'm a bogan.
But he spent a lot of his years. He said he was a supreme one. Everyone was thinking of work, dedicated.
Okay. Yeah, kind of for the last week or so, I've been doing a Vajrakilaya practice every day with my teacher in Taiwan. So. How are you? Good, and you? Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. All right. There you go. Is Felix here? All right. Freedom. Okay. No, it's okay. Oh. So he's now in Sweden. What is that? Yeah. That's cool. You can come up if you want. Okay.